My name is Komali Scott-Jones and I'm an A&R and creative consultant at Parlophone Records.
Shout out Young Swiss.
It's always a funny one with A&R jobs. If you ask anyone that does it, they'll have a different way in. So before I was even in music, I was in fashion. I was a booker at a hair and makeup agency called Premiere, which was amazing. I had a really good experience there. Just taught me how to keep calm and collected and all of that stuff. But I kind of knew that it wasn't the right place for me. And with all the stress and strains that come from these creative industries, you kind of know if you're in the right place. So I just took a gamble and applied for an internship at a record label called Virgin EMI. And that was in TV promo. So I went for that and got it kind of same day as the interview. And I was a bit like, whoa. I applied knowing that I wanted to make the change and just switch the whole thing up, but it kind of came about quite quick. But it was the best thing I ever done. So I went right into that. It was a year internship, and it was just great to work in a label and kind of see from every angle what goes on and how it all works and how all the different departments come together. So TV promo wasn't necessarily an area that I planned to be in, but it was a great insight into that whole world and how it works now in a modern age where TV is less important, and also how, you know, the A&R process plays into that, and kind of having that perspective when you're looking for an artist that you do really want to sign. So yeah, in that year that I was at Virgin, I just made sure that I spoke to every different department, including A&R, and just managed to make really good connections. And there is a wonderful A&R called Lunik, who's now manager at Virgin EMI, and he was doing a signing and he asked me to come into it. And I was like, yeah, sure. At the time, I thought it was just, making up the numbers and, but I went into it and it was wicked. It was amazing to see how a pitch meeting works, what it looks like. So this particular artist had a wicked manager. So after the whole, record label spiel, you could say, from the president and the other heads of department, he said, I want to hear from everyone in the room. There was probably 20 of us at the time. I want to hear why you want him to sign here. I want to hear from every single one of you. And I'm not normally nervous. I'm quite good under pressure and speaking in front of people. But I was like, whoa, that was a bold move. I proper rated it. I just thought, as a young manager, he was still in uni at the time. Both of them were in uni. I just thought, yeah, that's exactly how we should be moving. And he's a young rapper. And yeah, I found it really inspiring to just see someone so young emerging from our scene with that level of confidence. And so we all had to go around and say what we all thought. And I kind of got to the person before me and I could hear my heart beating out my chest. And I was like, bloody hell, don't normally get nervous, but I was a little bit like, whoa, because it was the big players in the room. And I was an intern, only been there for about 4 months at the time. So it was quite a big deal for me. Whatever, I kind of blacked out and said whatever I said, kind of blurted out. And my boss at the time, president, he started slow clapping and was just like, well, yeah, I couldn't have said it fucking better myself. And yeah, it was probably, I didn't see it at the time for what it was, but it put me and my name on the map for a lot of important people who, just kind of realised I had something to say and I had a certain knowledge and approach and a good way with words, I think, which is an important part of the job. And so from there, by the end of that year at Virgin, I had a few offers for A&R jobs at various labels, and I chose Parlophone. So here I am today. Being a woman in this field and a black woman in this field is a challenge at points. I think it's a challenge in any field, in any industry, to be honest. But I think it is working to my advantage at this certain point in time. Just what's happening culturally in the UK, in terms of the music scene, in terms of the direction that music is heading in. I think there's a lot of advantages to being a black woman in this game at the moment. And I think, increasingly, I hope that power stays with us and we all kind of realise, the advantages that it does bring. I think just in terms of the upbringing that I've had, I'm able to kind of, I guess like, whatever they call it, code switching, but you need to be able to walk into any room and adjust yourself to those surroundings, whoever you are, whatever your color, race, creed. Like, that's a really important part of this job, because you are mixing with people from so many different places. And I think if you can master that, you're good to go, whoever you are. I think I have had, being a woman in A&R especially, it is very male dominated. I'm the only girl on my team at the moment, but it's cool. I think it's a good thing. I think it's positive to feel like you can stand up in a room amongst men, even though it is male dominated, and feel like you have, you can hold your own. And I do feel that I've got that, and I think that artists and other people react quite well to that when you're a woman that can do that. There's a stereotype of, if you want to be successful in this game, that you have to become a bitch if you're a woman and be really hard and not have kids and not have a boyfriend and not have that balance. Otherwise you can't be quite as good as your male counterparts. And I'd like to think that, the way that society is changing and growing, that won't be the case for a lot of black women coming up. I think we can strike a balance. I think the downside to it is that, there are still some archaic points of view and attitudes from men in the industry in terms of how they deal with you and what they kind of expect you to handle and achieve and all of that stuff. And that's irritating on a daily basis to battle with. But I think, if you know your stuff, you can just kind of push through and make sure that you're heard and you make your point. In the last 18 months, we've had an explosion of black artists coming through: rap, drill, Afro swing, bashment, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's been a lot of stuff that wasn't in existence 3 years ago. And I think naturally you see a few key players come out and do really well. You've got the Husses, the Baines, the Kojo Funds, like all of that whole crew, like amazing artists that kind of came through and set a certain level and tone and brought something new to the table. And after that, people that are also coming up, musicians and artists, see that success and emulate it. So you kind of have a weird period where there's a lot of copycatting, there's people, following that trend rather than setting their own. And I think in kind of this period, for me anyway, it's really interesting to watch the dust settle, and watch who rises to the top out of that sound that's prevalent at the time, and what branches off from that. So you had that whole Afro swing period where it birthed a lot of stars that will be around for a long time, in my opinion, and have done amazing things for the scene in the UK. Then you have the Octavians that have come with a new sound that again straddles the UK and appeals to the US, which our scene has always struggled with. We don't quite make the mark for Americans for some reason. I don't know if it's snobbery. I don't know. I think it's a lot of things. They claim to not be able to understand us, which I always think is rich when they have a whole genre called mumble rap. But I think it's really interesting to just watch the scene develop, and I think it really shows you when you sit back and let things play out a little, rather than coming from a record label perspective, pour money into it because it seems to be working for a couple of people. If you let the scene breathe a little bit, you kind of get to see who really, really wants it, who's the real stars, who is going to last longer than, this kind of moment. And then who else is going to come through and do something completely different that's going to change the game again. And so for me now, after this kind of 18-month period of a certain type of music prevailing and hitting the charts, like, it's really interesting to see what's next and what's gonna, emerge and be the next big thing that we can all support and back and push. My advice to young women that want to get into the industry would be, don't expect to be given anything. Don't expect to be treated equally, no matter what, the feminist agenda is telling you that is so loud at the moment. Forget all of that. It is properly every man for themselves, and women after that. Like, it is still very much that culture, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. I think for me personally, my first record label job was amazing. I was at Virgin, who have a really diverse team. They've got a great internship. Universal have a great internship scheme, which gives a lot of people a chance to get their foot in the door. There were also lots of women who were running their departments or senior members of staff, which I thought was important to see, and also women of colour in those positions. And so that was, for me, I had a really great kind of example that I wanted to, it was like a great benchmark for how I wanted to see the rest of my career and the type of team I wanted to work in. I think it is important to have a diverse workforce. And I think for all of the major labels and massive companies and corporations at the moment, diversity and inclusion is a really important part of the agenda. But again, there is a level of box ticking and saying that they want to make it happen to say that they said it rather than really actioning that. And I think when you are moving into those spaces, I think you have to remember that you are a woman and what advantages you have over your male counterparts when it counts. I think you just have to focus on being the best at it, regardless of who you're up against, whether that's a room full of women or a room full of men. I think that is the focus. And I also would say, for me, it's really important, especially in this field of A&R, it is very informal, the music industry. You're socialising and networking with people in clubs and bars and gigs and events. And so where, if you're working at a bank or a solicitor's, you're in boardrooms and there's kind of an invisible barrier of behaviour that everyone's expected to abide by. I think in the music industry that can sometimes go out the window a little bit easier when you've had, 3 glasses of champagne or whatever the case may be. And I think for me, it's always been important to be known and valued for my integrity and my merit and how I carry myself, in my business deals and how I portray myself and my personality. And I think it's really important to be sure of how you're moving in those circles. There are going to be men who want to take advantage because you're good looking or you're pretty or, you've got this many followers. And I think you can't be naive to that. And I think, it's really important for me to make sure that when I do step into a room and it is full of men or it's an artist that, they're used to getting their way and girls throwing themselves at them and all of that, like that there's a different level when you're speaking to me. It's business. Like, we're cool, we can kick it, we can bust joke, all of that. But really, I'm here to do a job and I want to be treated as such and respected as such when I'm delivering a service and a good job for you. And I don't think that those two should be confused. I would hate for someone to walk into a meeting with me and think that they can flirt or make an inappropriate comment because of an energy that I'm putting across. Like, I want it to be, we're mad cool, but this is business. And I think it's important to kind of lay that out as best you can, whether it's body language and just your energy. I think that's really important. Where do I see myself in a couple of years? Such a hard question. I think I would love to have mastered this field of A&R a little bit more. I haven't been doing it a long time, and I think a lot of it is instinctive, but there's also, a lot to learn, and I'm super keen to learn everything there is and be around the best in the game and meet people who have changed it along the way for me to do this job now. And I think I would love to have a few more amazing artists that I look after, have some top 10s, a number 1, a few discs on my wall. Just really kind of keep building what I've started here already, just because I do really feel like I found my niche and found where I should be. And I just want to keep building on that. But equally, where I changed careers so quickly, I think it's important for people coming up in this to not be so rigid. Like, whereas 20 years ago, if you were in this game, if you started in press, you'd probably stay in press and not necessarily move around. And I think we're just in a really amazing time where you can have so many strings to your bow that really add value to whatever it is that you're doing. And I think, if you're doing work for the community or you're on radio as a presenter or you DJ, or there's so many things that can encompass you and what you stand for that really help you to get your foot in the door in places like this, because they need that perspective. They don't want people that are just good at one thing. It's not really enough now in 2019. Like, you need to have your fingers in a few pies and perfect that as best you can. I would say that I would keep working on that.